Hey guys, it's David from Gigi's Fabric Shop, home of Janome Junkies and Juki Junkies, and in today's video, we're going to go over how to thread and wind your bobbin on the Janome 6650/6700. They are pretty much identical machines, so bobbin winding and threading is going to apply to both of those models. I'm also going to go over some fun tips on common user errors we see and experience on these machines with threading and winding the bobbin. So make sure you stick around for the full video because there's going to be tons of great educational information on this video. Okay, so the first thing I want to go over is I'm going to structure this video with the winding first and then the threading, and then after I show you how to successfully do that, we're going to also go over some common user errors that I've seen in the past. So that way you guys can learn from those as well. So I highly suggest watching this video all the way through. You'll learn a ton. Maybe you have never threaded this machine and those common user errors will help you out in the future, or maybe you're experiencing some issues right now and maybe those little tips will help you out. So make sure you check out this whole entire video. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what size spool I'm going to be using. So if you're using a mini spool, today we're using a Glide 40 weight. You can just throw it on the spool stand back here with nothing on it and it's totally fine. If you want to use a king size spool or a large spool, it is important that you use an anti-vibration cone, and this just helps stabilize your spool so it doesn't wobble around. So let me just show you what that looks like. With no cone, it can wiggle like that. With the anti-vibration cone, it doesn't wiggle nearly as much. Those anti-vibration cone that comes with your machine is going to look something like this. This also works, but I do like the full-size ones a little better. I think they stabilize it more. So just keep that in mind. We're going to go ahead and start with winding our bobbin with a small spool. And of course, I've picked a nice, vibrant, bright color. I'm going to push this up like that. So you're just going to put your spool on the back, just like this. Set it down, make sure it's seated all the way down. You're going to run your thread into one of these little thread guides right there on the top. And then all you're going to do is just wrap your thread around this little tension gauge or tension guide right here. So it just goes right around that, just like that. And what I like to do is whenever I put my thread through a tension disc, I like to hold both sides so I can make sure I kind of floss it in between, make sure it's seated all the way down in that disc and it's not just barely in there. Then you're going to grab your Class 15A clear bobbin. Remember, this machine is computerized, so you're always going to be using a clear Class 15A. It's important to run authentic bobbins in these machines. Sometimes you can buy a whole pack on other websites other than like Janome websites and stuff, and they're not authentic and they are not the same, and they can actually give you a lot of issues. So keep that in mind. So once you have it around that disc, you're just going to run the spool or the thread through this little hole. There's a variety of different holes on this bobbin. It doesn't matter which side, you're just going to push it through the bottom, going to the top, just like that. And then once you get it through there, you can just put it on your bobbin winder spindle there. And then what I like to do is I like to just pull a little bit and make sure the thread is feeding nice and evenly and nice and smoothly. Once I know that's good, I'm just going to hold my thread up like this and push this little button over and press my bobbin winder button. Now once I get it spooled up where there is a good amount, maybe 5 to 10 seconds later, I'll press that bobbin winder button one more time and I'll go ahead and snip my thread as close as I can to the bobbin. And then I'll go ahead and press that bobbin winding button and wind it the rest of the way. Now while it's winding, it's important to really look at the thread as it goes on there, making sure it's going up and down and winding it nice and even. But it's also important to make sure that your thread is actually staying in the tension disc so that way you're not winding a squishy bobbin. So here we are winding the bobbin thread. And if you're experiencing a squishy bobbin, you can always tighten this little screw a little bit more, or you could just pinch the thread right here and give it more tension by just pinching this thread just ever so slightly. So when it's done winding, it'll just kick out and it'll just stop. Now you can take it off and you can go ahead and cut it right here on this backside. Boom, cut your thread. And as you can see, our bobbin is nice and tight, not very squishy. There should be a little bit of squish, but it shouldn't be super squishy. So it's nice and even, nice and tight. You should be able to just pull your thread right off of it just like that. So once we have done that, we know we've successfully wound our bobbin. It looks great. And now we can go ahead and put that into our bobbin case, and then we can go ahead and thread our machine. Okay, so now it's time to insert our bobbin. The first thing you're going to want to do is make sure your thread is falling down on the left side, not the right side. So it should be making a P, not a 9. This would be a 9. Typically, your thread falls down on the right side with mechanical machines or industrial straight stitches, but with a computerized machine, with a computerized bobbin, it's going to fall down on the left side, making a P. So now that we've got it in the right orientation, we're going to go ahead and just drop that down into our bobbin case area, and it's just going to drop just like that. And now all you're going to do is just pull your thread towards you, and it's going to fall into one little slot right there on the bobbin case, and then pull it over to the right just a little bit more. It's going to go underneath this little metal finger, and then you literally just pull it, and it just falls into little guides. So you got one, and then you got two over here where it just cuts. So that's all you have to do to put your bobbin in. And then of course, all you're doing is closing your little door, just like that. And you don't have to pull up your bobbin thread on this machine. It'll automatically pull it up. So don't worry about manually pulling up your bobbin thread on these machines. These are newer machines, and you don't really have to do that. So let me just go ahead and do that one more time in fast motion so you can see it. Making a P, drops down, falls in that slot, right around there, boom, boom, cuts automatically right there, and then that's it. All right, our final step is going to be threading this machine. We're going to, of course, go from the spool stand to our thread guide just like that. And now we're going to go through this little thread guide here. And one thing I want to highlight real quick is just the little animation that they have here. If you see, it says 1, 2, and then 3 for the bobbin winding. The little scattered line is going to be your bobbin winding path, and then the solid line will be your actual threading path. They have it set up with 2 different spools here, so you could actually not have to unthread it whenever you bobbin wind. But most people want to use the same color, and they don't have the same color, so you would just use one spool like we are. Anyways, so thread from the spool to the thread guide up here. Then we're going into this little thread guide here, and then we're going to go ahead and go behind this thread guide / tension disc, and it just slides right into the back there. Again, that just slides right in, and then it literally naturally wants to get pulled right into this slot here. So you're going from here to here, and if you notice, I have my right hand holding my thread. Again, like I'm flossing, I love to do this. It just helps ensure that everything stays in place. Now I'm going to go down, and I'm going to follow number 4 straight down this side here, and then it's going to want to just slide right into our main tension disc, which is right here in this little slot. So you're going to go right in there, and then now you're going to follow 5 up. So you're going to go straight up like that, and at this point you're going to want to rotate that hand wheel so that take-up lever comes up just like there. You should see the take-up lever all the way up, and then this should just, you should kind of hear it click in just like that. There's a little spring on there to catch the thread from falling out if your thread were to fall out of the take-up guide or take-up lever. So there you go, you have it in that little take-up lever. Now you're going to come down, and you're going to see that it says number 7 right here on the side. Once you get to 7, you're going to bring your thread down into this thread guide here. Kind of just clicks into place. And then you're going to go into your needle bar thread guide, just like that. And now you're going to go into your little crab claw, we like to call it. It's like a little claw, and you're just going to put it right in that claw like that. And then all you have to do is push down your needle threader, hold it for a little quarter second, make sure it's pushed down all the way, let go, and your needle threader has threaded your needle. Just like that. There you have it. So now that we've successfully threaded and wound a bobbin, let's go ahead and do a quick little sew out, and then we'll go over some common user errors when threading and winding your bobbin. There you go. You know you have successfully threaded and wound a bobbin when your stitches look nice and clean and everything worked perfectly. Now let's go over those tips. Okay, so tip number 1, this is probably the most common issue I've ever seen. People will throw their thread spool down and the thread is wrapped around the bottom of the cone. So let me just try to exaggerate that a little bit. Maybe your thread is like this, okay? And then your thread gets wrapped around the bottom of your cone like that. And whenever your thread comes off, you can see how it's just getting tangled and it's getting hung up. And look at this wire, how it's putting all this tension up here. So whenever you sew, if you're having issues, look at your thread and watch how it's coming off your spool. If it's getting tangled like this, then you know you're having an issue and you need to address the way your thread sits onto your thread stand, making sure it's sitting nice and flat. Also making sure that if there's a spot where your thread can get tucked into, that it's closed, so that way the thread doesn't get hung up in there in that little groove. Every spool has a little spot usually for your thread to get cleaned up when you're done, and you can tuck it away and snip it. And a lot of times those spots are failure points where things get caught into. But what I like about this glide spool is you can actually close it up and it won't be an issue. But some spools have like little slots in them. That can be a spot where thread gets caught into when it's winding off and can cause tension issues or issues like we just showed. So that's going to be one of the common user issues or common user errors. The next one is going to be spool caps. So when you have a thread stand like this, I honestly recommend no spool caps. I know you can use spool caps. I know it can be successful. This spool cap, for instance, would fit this machine or this thread, but you could also use a bigger one. But the common issue I see here is sometimes your thread will actually get caught because your spool cap's not on properly in between, just like that. And then when it's coming off, you see how it's just, watch, same thing is happening before. You see how it's just pulling super tight and it's not coming off evenly. Well, that's why I honestly don't like using spool caps when I'm using a thread stand that's up and down like this. I've even seen people put the big spool cap on the bottom and then their spool like this and a spool up here and a thread spool cap up top. And it just causes so many little places for your thread to get wrapped around. So I highly recommend just no spool caps and just inspect your thread coming off your spool. It should come off nice and smoothly just like that, and you should have no issues. Okay, so that is definitely one of the most seen issues with threading machines, people not using spool caps properly, or maybe they're not using them at all on different machines where you actually do need to have them, such as like a computerized machine where your spool's laying horizontally versus vertical, like we have on this machine. The next common user error would be just completely, totally skipping this thread guide. And what happens is now if you skip that thread guide, your spool is going, or your thread is going directly to this guide over here. And what happens is you can see the angle is pretty harsh, so it's very likely that this thread could come back out of this, and then it could just make a mess and you don't have your machine properly threaded. So make sure you're going through that thread guide and this thread guide, so that way your thread's coming out of this thread guide here, coming directly down, and then it has a much cleaner angle going into this thread guide and all of these guides here. The next big tip is going to be over here by your needle bar. Whenever you go to use your needle threader, a lot of people forget to make sure their needle is either the right size needle or all the way up. So whenever you insert your needle, you should be able to loosen this just a little bit, drop your needle down, but also make sure your needle's pushed up all the way. Also make sure you're using a universal flat needle, and the flat side should be facing back, so that way the needle hole is facing directly at you and the scarf of the needle is on the back side of the needle. That is a very common issue, is people just don't insert their needle all the way, or they don't have it in the right direction, or it's the wrong needle system. But the next thing would be making sure your needle is in the right position. So what you always want to do before using your needle threader is pressing needle down, needle up, and making sure it's in that highest position. And then you also want to make sure your needle is an 80-12 or larger for your needle threader to work properly. So make sure you're using an 80-12 or larger, and also make sure your foot is down. If your foot is up, your needle threader will not want to work because it's going to want to run into your foot. So make sure your foot is down. The next tip is going to be making sure your foot is in the right position when you thread your machine. A lot of people believe that you can only thread your machine with your foot up because your tension discs are becoming separated, allowing your thread to go into them properly. However, I have found that you can thread your machine with your foot up or down as long as you're using the flossing method that I've talked about, where you're really making sure you floss that thread through those discs. If your foot is down, you'll notice that your thread will get a little bit tougher when you're threading your upper tension, and you're going to also kind of feel it go through those tension discs a little bit more. When the foot is up, you won't really notice it because the discs are separated and you won't feel them go through that. So just make sure if you're threading your machine with your foot down, you're using that flossing method where you hold both sides and you kind of move it back and forth to make sure it's getting seated in those tension discs. The next common issue with bobbin winding is people don't visually watch their thread stay in this disc the whole time. Oftentimes when winding your bobbin, your thread could fall out of this tension disc, and then you're going to have a squishy bobbin. So whenever you're winding your bobbin, make sure your thread is actually properly seated in between those two tension discs. That's when flossing it makes a big difference. And also visually inspect and watch it the whole time and making sure that tension looks properly. You can also, like I said, pinch this thread here to give it a little bit more tension if you're getting squishy bobbins. Another quick little tip is going to be that you can adjust your bobbin amount of thread that's going on your bobbin by just loosening this Phillips head screw and adjusting this little finger back or left or right. Right is going to bring this nub this way, allowing more thread on your bobbin, and bringing it left will actually restrict how much thread's on your bobbin. So if you're not getting enough, use the Phillips head screw, barely loosen this little screw, and then you can adjust this to the left for less or to the right for more. If you haven't already, join the Janome Junkies Facebook group. It's a private group on Facebook with thousands of Janome sewers that love to share their goods, their bads, and their projects about their Janome machines. It's a great place to learn more helpful tips on your Janome or learn different things that your machine can do that maybe you didn't already know. So go ahead and head over to Janome Junkies. We'll put a link in the description so you can learn more about the Facebook group. And just like that, we have now set up our machine for success and we're ready to start sewing some projects. If you guys are looking for a new Janome machine, whether it's embroidery, straight stitch, or computerized, or maybe you're even looking at a Juki machine or an industrial machine, give us a call here at Janome Junkies. We are looking to fit you into the right machine, but also provide you with amazing customer service, whether you're local to the Florida area or if you're out of state. We love FaceTime our customers and talking to them on the phone and fitting them into the right machine for their needs, because if you get the right product, you'll be a happy customer and it makes our job a lot easier. So that's our #1 goal here, is to fit you in the right machine or accessories for your machine. So check out janomejunkies.com for more accessories and machines and notions. And also, maybe if you check in the description of this video, you'll find a little coupon code for our website. Little hint, it might save you some money. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this video. Give us a like, hit the comments up, and drop a comment if you have any questions or any issues with threading or winding your machine. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button because we post every Sunday. We hope to see you guys next Sunday. Bye-bye.